All right. Welcome, everybody. How's everybody doing? Let us know in chat how you're doing. I'd like to hear where you're from, how old you are, and I'd also love to know what swim team you're repping, all right? We've got my good friend here, Rudy Garcia-Tolson. He's just got to turn his audio and video on, and we'll go ahead and get started. While we're waiting, I want to take this opportunity to let you know about a couple of things that we have going on. We actually are doing a giveaway later this week. There's a giveaway later this week. We're giving away 3 Fitter and Faster gift cards for people who want to come and join one of our clinics. If you've been to one of our clinics, great. If not, if you haven't been to one of our clinics, great. You actually have to find a very specific post on our Instagram account. It's at Fitter and Faster Swim Tour. And I'm going to pull up the post right now so you can see it. But here's what you have to do. You have to find this post on our Instagram. You have to comment and preferably share that post. And then you also have to sign up for the webinar that I'm showing on your screen right now. So if you sign up for it and you do what's in the caption of that post, you'll be entered to win a free gift card. All right. Everybody likes free stuff, right? So, hey, Rudy, turn your audio and video on using those 4 blue buttons up at the top of your screen. You there, buddy? Maybe try closing out the link or closing out the tab and then reopening if it's not working. But while we're working on that with Rudy, I guess I'll chat a little bit about kind of like the idea behind this webinar. So Rudy and I go way back. We're both from Riverside, California. I've known the guy since I was like 9 years old, and he's got a really cool story. We're both swimmers. He's been a swimmer as long as I've been a swimmer, or actually longer because he's still swimming. We're both 31 years old now, and we're both Olympians. We both competed at the highest levels of our sport. So what's interesting about Rudy is that, he has a little bit of a different background, and he was born with a condition that basically makes him a little bit different from me in terms of what his body is and what he can do with it. But he is, I would say, a heck of a lot more successful as a swimmer than I am. He's a world record holder, multiple Paralympic medalist, generally an awesome dude. Let me give him a call real quick and see what's going on with our feed. So he should be online with us. Give me a moment. Real quick though, while we're waiting, I'd love to hear from you guys in chat right now. Let me know if you guys have any questions for Rudy. I'd love to know if you have any questions for Rudy. And as we get him online, we'll go ahead and start off by getting some questions out and answered. 1 second. Yo, you there? Turn your audio and video on. There he is.
Hello.
All right. I was over here like, I hope nothing's wrong with his computer or anything like that. So
can I see you?
Can you see or hear me?
We're having technical difficulties. Real second. I can't see you, Tyler. I see a picture of you.
All right, we're gonna have him reconnect. And see if that fixes it. So yeah, he's here now, but for some reason he couldn't hear or see me. So obviously that's kind of required for us to have our conversation. So he's going to reconnect and we'll get him back online. So when did he start swimming? So Taylor Smith asked when Rudy started swimming. Here he is. He's back.
There we go. Sorry about that, everybody.
All good. So I gave everybody like a really brief, probably super awful intro of you. Yeah. But I told everybody that, you and I met each other when we were 9 years old. We were swimming for Riverside Aquatics Association. And I guess, just take it from there, kind of, let everybody know about yourself. Give us the 30-second elevator speech about Rudy.
Sure. Well, first, I just want to say thank you for having me, Tyler. It's always good to reconnect. As you mentioned, we were once age groups teammates way back in the day. We can get into that later, but very cool. Who would have thought that 20 years down the road, you would become an Olympic champion and I'd be a Paralympic champion coming from the same team. So kind of cool.
Very cool.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rudy Garcia-Tolson. I am 31 years old. And I'm currently in Brooklyn, New York, and I am a 4-time Paralympic swimmer. And my main event was the 200 individual medley and also the 100 breaststroke. I'm also an Ironman finisher, the first double above knee amputee to finish an Ironman triathlon. What brought me to swimming really was, when I was born with multiple birth defects. And the biggest challenge was that my legs, I could not stand up on them. I could not walk with my 2 legs. And also my hands were webbed right here. My middle fingers were webbed together. And I kind of wish they would have kept them because it would have been really good for swimming. But they separated those at birth. And I have full range of motion on my hands and everything. But my legs were really the biggest challenge. And when I was born, the doctor suggested to my parents that they should amputate my legs at the knee. And my parents refused to have the doctors remove my legs because they didn't want me to come back when I was 20 or 30 years old and question that decision. So I went through, basically grew up in a hospital. I was in the hospital from when I was born to when I was about 5 years old. And I did get to go home every now and then in between surgeries, but most of my childhood that I remember was inside of a hospital. And, when you're young and you're the youngest of 1 brother and 3 sisters, when you're very young, you don't really realize what's really going on. And the way that I really found out that I was different, that I was, things were going to be a little different for me compared to my brothers and sisters was, being in the hospital, and my brothers and sisters got to go home and I had to really stay inside the hospital. And so I right away realized that, I had a different path. And, being young and overhearing the doctors talk about my situation, I kind of knew what was going on pretty early on. And it got to the point where I was kind of fed up being in the hospital. I did not enjoy going into surgery after surgery. I did not really enjoy really feeling like I was, disabled, so to speak. And so after about 15 of the operations, the doctors tried everything. I remember one of the things that they tried on me was called a laser off. And a laser off is somewhat of a halo that goes around your leg that is supposed to straighten your leg out. And so I had one on one leg for 6 months and one on the other for 6 months. And you can imagine I had metal rods going into my bone from my thigh all the way down to my ankle. And the idea of this was that every day my mom would turn a little lever next to my knee and it would slowly straighten my leg out over a 6-month period. And if you can imagine, it didn't hurt right away. My mom made those adjustments, but a few hours later, my leg would just be in the worst pain ever. And that's a lot of what I remember in my childhood. It was just a lot of the pain. And so I got to the point when I was 5 years old, the doctors really kind of tried everything and nothing was working. So I remember talking to my parents and the doctors and just saying, what's the big deal here? Let's cut my legs off. For me, it was never a very difficult decision. It was a black and white decision. It was, stay in the hospital and wait around, or have my bottom part of my legs removed and see where I can go. I didn't really realize that I could get prosthetic legs that were for different sports. I just realized that my legs were my chains, and I wanted to cut them off. And so I had my legs amputated when I was 5 years old, and then soon after, I got my first pair of legs, my first pair of prosthetic legs, and they were the basic insurance bought legs that my family could afford at the time. I grew up in a trailer park. My dad was a cook at a truck stop, and my mom really just took care of us kids. So we were not financially rich, so to speak. But it was the legs that I got there in the beginning were the basic legs that really they were giving to older patients who are maybe diabetic and I needed to get to the kitchen, to the room, and so these legs that I had, I when I put them on, I can say the first thing I remember was being able to stand up tall and kind of look at my brothers and sisters at an eye level. For me, that was like new. Another cool thing is that, going into the kitchen and, just seeing what was on top of the kitchen counter and actually being able to reach and open the cabinets for me was like a whole new world. And those little things that I remember the most. But, when I got my first pair of legs, I would break these legs like, in my first year, I had my prosthetic legs. I broke them about 50 times, and that's
knowing you for as long as I've known you. That doesn't surprise me at all.
How I am. I like to get outside. I like to go. I don't ever think of my legs as a problem. It's just who I am. And being young and being going through all the surgeries and realizing that you're different, and finally getting to the point where you get your first pair of robot legs. I was super excited, and it was still a big setback though, because I kept breaking them. And it wasn't until my mom made a homemade VHS video of me jumping in the backyard, jumping over the wall, really just being a kid as an amputee. And she sent it to the company who currently makes my legs, called Oser. And they saw this video of me being a kid, and they decided to send me a new pair of legs. So I tell people I went from a Pinto car to a Ferrari overnight. So it was like boom, boom. All of a sudden, my legs were titanium. They were carbon fiber. They were easy to put on. And really, that's really when my story started, because I started to walk to school every day, and that's when I got involved in my first sport, which was swimming. And I really gravitated towards swimming because it was the one sport that I didn't need legs, believe it or not. I was able to just take my legs off and jump into the pool and just use my arms. And I was, I started out a little nervous, a little scary, but as I started to develop my swimming stroke, I started with freestyle. I became very confident in myself in the water. And that's when I joined my first swim team. I think I was about 7 years old, and this is in Southern California as well. And I joined my first swim team as the only kid with a disability. So I was like the sore thumb. I was like sticking out. Everybody knew who I was. They kind of called me the boy with no legs. And I used to go race. I would go to these swim meets, and anyone knows age group swim meets, they take about 5 hours for one session. So I'd sit there just to swim one event. I'd be there for 6 hours, but that's just the name of the game. And I would go to these races, and I would come in last every time. I'd be last to touch the wall. I'm in the last heat or the first heat, whatever was slowest. And it got to the point where I would recognize that everybody was trying to make me feel good for just participating. And I didn't want none of that. I didn't want the pity. I wanted to earn my respect just like anybody else. And so I made myself a goal. My goal was to beat a kid with legs. That's all I wanted to do. So I just wanted to beat you, Tyler. I had my sights set, and that's all I wanted to do. I didn't care about anything else. I just wanted to beat one kid. And from that one simple goal of just wanting to beat one kid, really led me down a path of traveling the world and becoming a Paralympic champion and becoming an Ironman. And really, doing things that I never imagined. And, really, that's really what this is all about. It's about setting goals and following through those goals, because it always takes one small step to go down a path that you would never imagine you would be. If you would have asked me 20 years ago that where I would be, I would never imagine, I don't know. I just would never imagine me being, where I am now and doing the things that I've done. From that one goal really set me down a path of going after goals and setting goals. And the next goal that I set for myself was in 1998, and I said I wanted to go to the 2004 Paralympic Games. And I actually have a newspaper clipping of me in 1998 that says that. So I didn't just make it up to make a cool story. And that's, in that, really I set that goal when I was 8 years old, and I ended up making my first Paralympic team in 2004 when I was 15 years old. And that's, I think, a lot of when our history came around. I think when I was about 9 or 10 years old when we first met, and then we swam together for, I believe, a good 5 or 6 years, if I remember, there at Riverside with Steve Walker, Coach Steve. I think, for me, it was baby steps. It was about improving my times, one race after another, trying to get a little faster, trying to make that national team, trying to make that national standard. And in 2004 was when I made my first Paralympic team. And I was the youngest on the team, just going for really experience because I was realistic. I wasn't trying to go win gold. I wasn't trying to come last, but I was being realistic. And I ended up swimming much faster than I ever did there in my prelim session in Athens. I ended up going 10 seconds faster in my 200 IM just out of nowhere. I don't know where it came from. Yeah, it was like a race, the race of my life. And I didn't realize that when I touched the wall, I realized I won my heat because, when you're swimming into the wall and you're, 15 meters from the wall, you sometimes like to look around and see where everybody is. It's prelims, not that important. And I realized I was going to win my heat. But it wasn't until I touched the wall and I turned around to look at the scoreboard and it said my name. It said 242.20 and it said WR next to my name. And I didn't believe it. I went into.
But let's stop there for a second. What does WR mean for those who are in the chat that don't know exactly what that means?
Sure, it's a world record. It's a world record, and I didn't believe it. And I got out of the pool, and I actually walked by my teammate who was going out to swim, Erin Popovich. She gave me a big hug, and I asked her if this was real, and she said yes. And right then I knew that, I did something that I never imagined doing. Obviously I dreamed about it. Anybody who wants to go to the Olympics always fantasizes about winning a gold medal and standing on top of the podium with the national anthem. And, it's just something that it's a fantasy, and for me to have that fantasy actually come true, I was just in disbelief. But, really at that moment, it really showed me, I proved to myself that if you set goals in your life, whether they be 5, 10 years down the road, and you work towards those goals on a daily basis, that you can get it done. There's no magic formula. It's just hard work pays off. And for me, that's what I feel like I learned in that first experience that really kept me going for another almost 20 years. So that to me is a quick elevator story.
And that's it wasn't a quick elevator story, but if you think about having to condense 20 plus years worth of athletics into 10 minutes or so, that was pretty awesome. And having known you for as long as I've known you, like it's been really cool to kind of watch your journey, because obviously, again, we're both from the same area. We started out on the same team, and but our journeys were very different. And I was telling people before you came on, like, Rudy is in many ways a heck of a lot more successful than I ever was in swimming, right? And for me, that was it was really prideful for me to be able to watch, somebody that I've known for so long kick so much butt. So let's take a step back and talk about some of the things that are going on right now before we get into kind of like, some of the later parts of your career and the other cool things that you've done. Let's talk about some of the things that are going on now. Sure. We've been doing these webinars now for, like 6 weeks. Yep. And we've put on, dozens and dozens of them. And a lot of times, we talk about, coronavirus, being cooped up, not being able to swim. And we get a lot of questions in the chat just about like, how do you deal with disappointment? How do you deal with adversity or obstacles? And one of the words that I used ahead of this show to describe, what we were going to talk about today is perseverance.
Yep.
So talk a little bit about what that word means to you, and maybe try to correlate it to some of the things that the people who are watching right now might be feeling and dealing with because they're cooped up and they can't swim.
Absolutely. I've over these past few weeks, I've really, my heart goes out to a lot of the swimmers out there who are not able to jump into the pool. Almost feels like their identity has been put on hold, and I can understand that because being on a team, especially a swim team, I feel like no one understands how different a swim team is compared to other teams. And yes, it's an individual sport, but it's really the teammates that get each other through the workouts that we go through, because none of the workouts that we go through are fun. You're in the trenches and you're suffering, and it takes somebody else to suffer with you, and for you to see that, to be inspired, to be motivated. All right, if he's doing it, so can I. And so, one thing that I've learned throughout my years of swimming is how important a team is, especially when you're in a main set and you have 2 more left, and you have to go. It's that having a teammate who is positive, who is motivating, is what it is really a deal breaker, I believe. When you're in the trenches and you're on the last 2 of the main set, and you see somebody complaining or hear somebody complaining about how hard this is, or how cold the water is, or any little comment, it really multiplies in your head, and it's a very contagious thing, especially the negativity. But for me, I've realized that the positive goes a long way. And throughout my life, throughout my journey, I've really come to a really good conclusion, and that is, I think everybody is aware of this, but you cannot control. You can't control. There's a lot of things in your life that you're not going to be able to control. So you got to be able to look at the things that you can't control and just accept them for what they are. And I think right now, in this world right now, we're all going through this quarantine. We're all going through social distancing. We're all going through really different things that we never imagined happening. But for me, I always got to think of the positive. What can you do today that will get you in a better place tomorrow? So when that day comes and we can get back into the pool, you're just as strong as you were the day you left the pool. And I know it's a very generic question, but I find myself now, I'm getting a little stir crazy, being inside a lot all day. And
well, you're in an area that's like a lot more locked down than a lot of the rest of the people in the country. You're in the smack dab in the middle of New York, and they've got some of the harshest lockdown protocols in place right now, much more than everybody else. So, if he says he's getting stir crazy, I promise you he is. And I know him. I know he likes being outside. So
I do. And this is really unprecedented times. We've never, I don't think we've gone through that, anything in our lifetime similar to what's going on today, and that's something that, I think everybody just needs to realize that it's out of our control right now. And with us having to be on lockdown and not being able to get into a pool, it's not fun. It sucks, but you really, whatever you can do to keep your mind fresh and keep your mind motivated, because when you're locked in a room all day or in a house all day, you start thinking about the things that you can't do, and that is a downhill spiral, because you start thinking about all the negative things. It's going to come, and you're going to become a negative person. And so whatever that means, there's so many ways that you can keep yourself occupied. I'd say the first thing you do is you do your sit-ups and push-ups. Knock out 100, 200 a day over the course of a day. Get out there and go for a run, go for a walk if you can. And and really the biggest thing is to stay connected. Stay connected with your friends, stay connected with your family. Because I'm starting to realize that the family and friends are really and very, very important in getting you mentally out of stress and mentally positive. Just a quick conversation with somebody can really turn your spirits around, and that's very important. And again, we're all in this together. Everybody is feeling it now. Everybody is wishing they can be back outside, back to normal again. At the same time, the question is, will we be going back to normal? And from my experience, I don't think we're going to get back to a normal, but we have to redevelop a normal. We have to rethink about different ways that we can keep ourselves motivated. Because if that old way is no longer an option, then you got to figure out a different way. There is no quitting. There's always a way to practice what you're doing, to stay motivated, and to find people who can help you stay motivated.
Yeah, absolutely. That's friggin' awesome.
It's funny. It's funny. Someone mentioned to me, Rudy, how you doing with the quarantine? And for me, thinking back in my young childhood years, I feel like when I was from born till when I was 5 years old, my whole life was a quarantine. Having a metal cage that had metal rods going into your legs. You can't go outside. You can't really do things. And so a lot of my childhood was almost like a quarantine. So, but that's beyond the point because, I feel like everybody is going through it right now as well. So. Yeah,
for sure. There's a question that I think would be good to answer right now. It's somebody named Jacob Goroff. I probably mispronounced that. I'm sorry. He asks, how did you deal with people who told you that you couldn't accomplish your goals?
I think those specific people who told me I couldn't were probably my biggest motivators. And I really want to thank everybody who doubted me because, being able to prove somebody wrong, being able to prove to yourself that you can, I don't think there's anything more powerful. Us as human beings, we hear everything, whether we like it or not. Everything that we hear goes into our ears and it goes into our head. And whether you like to pretend it affects you or not, it does in one way or another. And for me, as an example, starting back out, going back to school with 2 prosthetic legs, in first grade, you can imagine the type of bullying that I got. And, it didn't stop at first grade. I was bullied all through middle school and high school because of my legs, because of the way I looked. And I just think that, with the people who always doubted me, they really motivated me because there's nothing more that I wanted to see than to see myself do something that someone else said I couldn't. For me, that was like, you don't think I can ride a bike? Okay, let me show you. You don't think I can beat a kid with legs? Give me a minute. Let me train a little bit more. Let me get a little bit, let me improve a little bit. And this goes back to when I was born. The doctors told my parents that I would never walk. I would never run. I would never ride a bike. I would never live a normal life is what they told my parents. And I think just with that, with people always doubting you, you have 2 choices. You can either give in and say, okay, he's probably right. He knows me more than me. Or you can say, you know what? No, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to prove them that I can do whatever. And, the biggest thing that I think that I've been able to, bring away from all this, especially with what I've gone through is that, never let somebody tell you that you can't do something because they will always be there. You will always have someone tell you that it can't be done until it's done. Then they're going to say, oh, well, okay. So, doubters, they're always going to be there, and you have to learn to use them as fuel instead of them taking you down. So.
Yeah, for sure. There was a comment in here from Taylor Smith who said it's so boring to be normal, and a lot of times. And it's funny, and I'm sure that you can relate to this. There were a lot of times in my career where I was like, man, it would be so nice to just not have to, go and do the swimming thing and go and be like a normal person for a while. You know what I mean?
Wait, they're partying on Friday night? Oh, sorry guys, I got practice Saturday morning. I can't go. That type of.
Exactly. Here's kind of the flip side to the big, I think, message that you're kind of talking about, which is positivity, constantly being positive. What is talk to us a little bit about maybe some of the darker parts of your career, like when you were doubting yourself, or tell me about what some of those experiences might have been like, and like how you got through that.
Absolutely. I just want to add one thing to Mrs. Smith's comment about being normal is boring. A big quote that I love that I keep in my head that I tell kids every day is, they all laugh at me because I'm different, but I laugh at them because they're all the same. So I like that one because it really simplifies. It's true. No one wants to be the same. And I feel like we have a big population that everybody wants to look the same and be the same and say the same thing when everybody's different in their own ways. And I think that's something that people need to realize. And no one can do you better than you. But, to talk about some of the challenging times that I've had, I will definitely bring up when I was in high school. When I was in high school, I was just becoming comfortable with who I was and who I am. And, when you're growing up and you're missing both of your legs, and, I can honestly say from when I had my first pair of legs till when I was about 12, 13 years old, I never, ever, ever realized that people were looking at me because of my legs. Like, I was just oblivious to the whole thing because it didn't matter to me. I didn't care about any of that. What I cared about most was being able to go and do the same things that everybody else was doing. But for me, when I got to my high school years, I started to wonder, why is everybody looking at me? And I started to wonder why I am who I am. Why am I the boy with no legs? And of course, with that, the question comes, well, why me? And of course, the whole side of all this is not fair. This is, it's not fair. Why has everybody got legs but not me? And so when I was in high school, that big question was really at the forefront of my mind. And and as far as how powerful words can be, I remember when I was a freshman, one of my friends jokingly said something about my legs that literally stuck with me for the next 5 years of my life. I became insecure over something of who I was. And I know there are a lot of kids out there nowadays who might have an insecurity. They're scared about the way they look, the way they talk, there's so many different insecurities that people come up with, and for me, my biggest one was my legs. So when I was in high school, I used to wear pants every day. I never wore shorts.
I remember that.
And when I was in high school, I went on Oprah, and I went to the studio, and I was on Oprah with Robin Williams and Danny Glover, and I literally got back and I didn't tell anybody because I was embarrassed for people to see me on TV. That's just how I was at the time. And for me, I finally started to realize that my legs doesn't necessarily define who I am, but there's also another side to having two cross-legged legs. And I think that the positive side that I choose to look at is that people who see me, here in New York City, when I travel to the city via subway, I wear shorts all the time. And I guarantee you there's one person who sees me throughout the day and thinks to themselves, wow, if that guy can do it, so can I. And I think that's the power. That's the power there. That's the powerful side of what God's given me. I think that having two cross-legged legs is a gift, and it's a way for me to reach people. It's a way for me to, I don't want to say inspire because it's been used a lot, but it's a way for me to motivate people. It's a way for me to get somebody who is watching, even on this video, who might be struggling and something going on with their life. It can be superficial, it can be something big, it could be something small. But I hope that my message, and with someone seeing me and they say, wow, if this guy can do it and he's missing both of his legs, why can't I? At the end of the day, we all have our challenges. We all have our things that make us who we are. And I think that if it wasn't for these challenges, a lot of times we wouldn't figure out who we really are. I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't go through some of the negative things that I've gone through in my life, some of the challenges that I've gone through. But it's really how you choose. What you choose is what's going to happen. And I think that's the biggest thing here, is that you have the choice to make those changes.
Right. And you mentioned this earlier. It's like you control very few things, but the things that you can control, for example, one of the things is your mindset, and you clearly have developed an incredible ability to control your mindset. And I was sitting here listening to what you were talking about, and I found it really interesting that I started out with a question that has inherent negativity to it.
Yeah.
And without even thinking about it, you turned it around onto its head, and you got back to positivity again.
You have to. You have to. You have two choices in a situation that I think that you sometimes might find yourself in. You can either overcome the challenge, or you can let the challenge beat you. And I think that's the two options that you have. There's no other way. And I think that that being able to take that challenge and overcome it and use it as a positive, I think there's a lot of people out there who can do the same, and it's a challenging road. There's no right or wrong. It's something that each person has to figure out, on their own.
Yeah, for sure. So, you talked about this a little bit earlier as it related to your teammates and being able to kind of like feed off your teammates to get through a workout, like especially a really hard one. And I remember, there were a couple of times when we were both up at the Olympic Training Center where I got in and I swam with your group.
Yeah.
And I always thought it was so we've both been a part of a lot of teams, right? And
Sure.
I've been a part of some pretty cool teams that kind of really supported each other and helped each other out. And, we're kind of all in it for the same reasons. But I didn't think anything compared to the group of guys and girls that you trained with regularly up at the Olympic Training Center.
Yeah.
So, first off, I'm curious to know, what did you and the rest of that group think of me coming and training with you guys every once in a while? And secondly, talk a little bit about the camaraderie that y'all had.
Sure. So we actually had a team meeting before you came, and we had to take a vote on whether we wanted the guy with 2 arms and 2 legs to come swim with us. We actually decided that it would be okay. We gave you a pass, so we gave you a handicap placard to put in your window. Dude, we loved it. Whenever when training at the Olympic Training Center, how that is. You get into a daily routine, and that's the routine for the month or 2 months or however long you're there. You're in this set routine, and whenever we have an opportunity to train with some of our Olympic teammates, we loved having you because it was like a nice change of pace, but also you always bring something different to the table, a different dynamic that is going to change the talk around the pool deck before we get in, and I think that's something that, we always welcome, but especially you, it's funny because I was telling all my teammates, yeah, we used to swim together back in the day. And so I think right away we were like, of course the dude can come, and, he's more than welcome. We might have to tie his legs up, and see how fast. But we've being at the training center, I remember one time Mark Gangloff came and trained with us a little bit with Dave Dennison, our previous coach. And we always welcome different different teammates to come in because it just changes the dynamic on the pool deck. Which like I said, when you're at the training center and you're in your routine day in and day out, sometimes it can be challenging to separate the days. And when we have someone like yourself come and train with us, the days stand out more than just the normal days, so to speak. So there's always that added bonus. But being at the Olympic Training Center and training there day in and day out,
Well, just to clarify though, just because people don't know a lot of the context there. Rudy lived at the Olympic Training Center for a very long time. How many years did you live at the Olympic Training Center?
I first moved there back in 2004 before Athens for about 3 months. And then before Beijing in 2008, I lived there for 2 years. I was on campus. And then in 2012, I lived there for 2 years on campus. And then 2015 and 16 before Rio, I lived off campus, but I still trained there. So for me, it's always been a place for me that I know that I can get the work done, and I know that I can come back each day 100% ready to give each practice. That place is amazing. It's got the cafeteria, the recovery center, a sports med. I mean, any and everything you need to get yourself to the next level, the training center is there. So that's why I always chose to go and train there. But like I said, when we were training, usually you guys came in right after us. We would usually train 7 to 9, and then you guys came in from 9 to 11. So it was just always something going on there at the training center, and always new teammates coming in. And the one thing that I learned from being at the training center and really training there on a daily basis with teammates is that, again, like I said in the beginning, your teammates have a major effect on how your performances are, and again, this is an individual sport, but again, when you're in that main set and you got 2 more left and you don't feel like you can go a little bit faster, it's your teammates who are going to get you to that next 2. It's your teammates who you're going to look to, and you're going to say, all right, if he's doing it, so can I. And also, you can race each other. There's nothing better than being able to race your teammates, because when you get into a race, what you do in practice is how your race is going to be. There's no magic race time, and all of a sudden you're going to change and you're going to breathe, not breathe into the wall, and you're going to take 2 kicks off the wall. It's exactly how you practice is how you're going to race. And another big thing that I've learned there at the training center is that whatever is on paper, when we get to these competitions, nationals, trials, the games, you get a heat sheet and you can see where everybody is based on their time. And a lot of times we get into a habit of looking at that heat sheet and saying, oh man, I'm ranked 8th. There's no way I'm going to be able to get top 3. And you already lost the race just by thinking that, So a lot of things that, I've learned at the training center is don't look at the paper and have your race set already. You have that option to come from lane 1, to come through from lane 8 and do something amazing, and I think that's the beauty of swimming.
For sure. Somebody said you make the OTC sound a little bit like a college campus, and a lot of it is kind of like a college campus, just without the classes.
Without the school, very much.
So, but one of the things that I remember, and something that I talk to a lot of swimmers about, is being able to get your head outside of the pool too. Like, because I feel like a lot of swimmers fall into a little bit of a trap of just like constantly thinking about swimming, constantly, thinking about how they're going to get better and how they're going to improve, and just all these different things. And I feel like that can get really tiring. And for some reason, or for some people, that works really well. Sure. But I feel like you and I have this thing in common where, when practice is over, I don't really want to be thinking about it. And one of the things that I remember quite a lot from our times up in Colorado Springs was playing paintball together.
Yes.
We were both playing paintball like when we were kids, and like for a long time. In fact, you still have my paintball gun.
I do.
But I guess talk to us, tell everybody a little bit about some of our paintball outings and like how important it is to like get out and do other things outside of swimming too.
Sure, absolutely. I think that being able to disconnect from the pool daily, I would say, is mentally healthy. It can be, some people can focus on the pool all day, every day, and some people need to change it up and do something different in their lives that's not going to make them think about the pool. And I think we're one of those. When we're done with practice, sure, we can chat about it in the hot tub and talk about this and that, but as soon as we leave that pool, let's not talk about the pool until we got to go back. And of course, it changes, especially as you get near a bigger competition. But in the so to speak off season, or the times when you have a long time before your next big race, I think it's very, very important to try to do other things, not just in the pool. And for us, like you said, we used to go paintballing a lot in Colorado Springs, and I think we went speedballing downtown a few times, and then we went out far east to like more of like a rec ball paintball with other people. And I think that was like a highlight of my weekend when we would go out paintballing, because we would literally get there at like 9 a.m. and we wouldn't leave till 4. Yep. All day long. And I think it's just for us. It was like we were blowing off steam. It was like our way of disconnecting from the pool and realizing that there's a whole world out there, and there's a lot of other things that you can do. I think that for me, I've always had that mentality of I want to do something else. I want to do more. And paintballing has been one of them. For me, triathlon has always been something that I've always done kind of on this side. And that has really taken up a big chunk of my athletic career, but it's something that I enjoy. And I think that's, sometimes we get so caught up in performance in swimming and not going to PR or being 0.2 away from our PR, or whatever it is, we get so caught up in the numbers in swimming that we forget to take a step back and to think about the other things that we can potentially do as well that will, that it's only going to help at the long run. When we go paintballing on Saturday and Sunday and we come back to the pool deck on Monday, we are refreshed and we are ready to go, and we're ready to tackle the week because we know we were mentally refreshed. Now we're coming back, and now we need to get the job done. And I think that's something that I think all swimmers need to think about is just don't get too caught up in the numbers, because as you miss 1 or 2 days of the pool. That puts you back 3 or 4 days, feeling wise in the pool.
Right.
So there's so many factors to it. But again, I think it's very important to keep it refreshed, and that goes for what's going on the pool deck as well. To have a coach who keeps you mentally fresh and keeps you always on your toes, thinking about what's going to happen, what's next, it goes a long way.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember those days a lot, and it was so much fun.
Yeah.
I a lot of times I find myself thinking about being at the training center in a negative way because it's at altitude. All you're doing is training. But then I remember I also had some really fun times while I was out there. We were playing paintball.
We played a lot of games too.
What was that?
We played a lot of video games too.
We played a ton of video games. That's right. Hey, do you have your running legs nearby?
Sure. Let's see. Well, let me grab one of my legs. All right, 1 second.
Okay.
All right. So I got one of my running legs and one of my walking legs. So my running legs looks very similar. This is my running leg. Looks like a big C. My running legs are so that we usually make 2 holes up here. This is how it attaches to the prosthetic. And this is the length of your running foot. So this will usually be cut down a little bit more if you're a little shorter. You can see this is all made out of carbon fiber. So this running foot, this is what we use for usually sprinting out on the track. And this running foot was developed by a company called Oser. And this is really the idea behind these came from a gentleman in the 90s who was missing a leg and wanted to run. But the prosthetic that he had wasn't for running. So he thought, what's the fastest animal in the world? And he saw the cheetah, and the back leg of a cheetah has a very bowed leg, very similar to our running legs. And so with these right here, they give us a lot of energy return here. Usually when we go out and run, we put soles on them. So we'll have some soles, a mountain bike tread or something on the bottom there. And for me,
but this leg is specifically for running, correct?
Specifically for running, yes, just running. And then for my everyday use, I have my walking legs. This is just one of them, so I use 2 of them. But my walking legs, they have a foot, they got a knee, and then the socket. Really, this is my sock. So the way I explain it to kids is that when I wake up in the morning and I go to school, I put my socks and my shoes on. So my socks is nothing more than a silicone sock that goes over my leg, and then there's a screw that goes into here. And so this will then go all the way down into my leg, and it will lock into my leg with that little hole down there, which is almost like a tooth almost. So it'll get stuck in there. And this button right here is how I would release it if I wanted to take my leg off. But when I put my socks on and my leg goes all the way in there, you could actually hang me upside down and they won't come off. So they're very, very strong. And then, my legs are, very expensive. This leg right here is about $20,000. So,
oh, I didn't know that.
Very expensive. So both of my legs are a nice car, so to speak. This right here, this is my socket. This is more of like my shoe. And this is an exact model of my real leg. So when I put my leg in here, it actually fits very comfortably, almost like a glove. And that means that these are specially made for me and me only. So somebody else who's missing a leg can't steal this and use them, So this is for me and me only. And going on down here, this is my knee. And that's a computerized knee, which means there's an on button there. There's a charging port here, and it's got a light link in there, so that will tell me how low my battery level is, and if I need to charge my legs. I plug them into the wall, and they bend like a normal knee. The cool part about these knees is actually like as I said, they're computerized, and they actually read the way I walk about 100 times a second. So they're very, very on it. They know what I'm doing, what angle I'm at, and if I'm trying to walk faster or slower. And if I need to change any of the settings inside here, I could just hook it up to my phone Bluetooth, and it'll change the settings in there, which is very, very cool. And then going on down here, my foot, as you can see, is carbon fiber as well.
And that's kind of like the shape of the running legs.
Very similar, except this one has a heel. So there's actually a carbon fiber heel, so I can stand still. And this part here is the pylon, which is the part that I would change if I wanted to make myself taller. And I always tell people the cool part about having low legs is I can be as tall as I want. So it's a cool thing that no one really thinks about, but I take advantage of. And so yeah, these are my walking legs, and that's really how I get around. You know, without those, I would be not moving too fast.
Yeah, or you could be moving really fast. I remember when we were at the Olympic Training Center. Sometimes if you didn't feel like putting your legs on, you just grab the skateboard.
Yep. I skateboard around a lot. So yes, I'm actually pretty fast on just my hands and on the floor. But to answer a question, I don't have swimming legs. I found at a very young age that I can swim with just my arms. And when I train, a lot of times I'll put flippers on my legs, so I can still work on my core, and I can still work on being in a nice streamlined position and underwater kicking as well. So
cool. Well, we really quickly reached 51 minutes, so that absolutely flew by. But I think right now would be a good time for anybody else who's watching to ask Rudy any questions, any other questions that they might like him to answer, and we'll call it a session. Obviously, there's a little bit of a delay, so we'll wait a couple of seconds. But sure. Dude, it's cool to reconnect with you. Happy that you're doing well, and like I said, it's been really cool to watch your story. So thank you very much for coming on and talking to us a little bit. Yeah, Blair Wilson asked, how do you do a flip turn?
Flip turn, very, very easily. I don't really know how to explain it. I would say to Google my name, and you can YouTube my name, and you can find plenty of videos of me swimming. There's a few videos of me swimming in some of my major races, like in Rio and in Beijing and in Athens. So you can kind of watch some of my races as well. But I mean, flip turn, I don't know how to explain it. It's basically the same way you do a flip turn is how I do it as well. I just push off with the bottom of my legs. So
yep, exactly.
Yeah, very simple.
But talk to us. So somebody wants to know, how do you dive? And it's funny because it's going to be basically the same answer, right? It's the same process, just a little bit different.
Same process, except I sit on the starting blocks. I sit on the blocks, so let's pretend like this is the chair. And then what will happen is I'll grab the edge of the block, and I'll kind of pull back, and then I basically shoot myself off the block. But I'm sitting on the block. But again, if you YouTube my name, you will find some swimming videos of me, and you can really see what it looks like.
Yeah. Maya Krishnan asked what your main events are, and you said this earlier, but it was the 200 IM and the 100 IM. But I guess to maybe make it a different question, in which events did you set a world record?
It's always been in the 200 IM. That's been my main event since I was a little kid. I always loved the IM because it was a little bit of everything. And I always found that I was better at doing it all versus just one individual stroke. And my main event in the 200 individual medley, I go a 2:33.8 is my PR. And the 100.
That's long course, right?
Long course, yeah. And the 100 breaststroke, my PR is a 121.8. And then to talk more, my 100 freestyle meters, my fastest time is a 106. My 100 fly, I'm a 109. That's kind of like the ballpark of where I'm at. So
that's pretty solid. I have two questions for you. There's one that's a little bit of a longer one. I think you see it / are reading it, but I'll read it out for everybody else. Kelly Hickson asks, I have a daughter who's been told it's very likely that she could go to the Paralympics in 2024, if not Tokyo in 2021. But she's never been to any para competitions yet. So how would you get onto the Paralympic team?
Absolutely. I recommend she goes on the U.S. Paralympic website, go under the sport of swimming, and then look for the performance plan in swimming. And that will give you all the information that you need to know when the next competition is, where to get classified, and who to reach out to for more questions. And I believe it's going to be Queenie Nichols out of U.S. Paralympics.
Cool. And then somebody Googled you and they asked, what does S8 or SB7 mean?
Very good question. So in the Paralympics, as you know, there are many different disabilities around the world, different levels of amputation, different levels of spinal injuries, different levels of visual impairments. And so in the Paralympics, they do their best to categorize everybody into certain categories, which is the level of disability that they're at, the severity of the disability, so to speak. So an S1 or an SB1 is very, very disabled. Usually they are spinal cord injuries very high up, so they have very limited movement of their arms. Going up to like an S4 or S5, probably somebody who's missing their arms and their legs, and then or also a spinal cord injury as well, maybe a little bit higher. And then going to someone like an SB7 and S8, that is someone like myself who is just missing their legs below the knee, or maybe missing an arm, or maybe missing half an arm. And then going all the way up to S10, which is usually somebody who's missing a half a foot or a half a hand. And then going to S11, 12, and 13, those are visually impaired. So you're either fully blind, partially blind, or a little bit blind. So
Gotcha.
Very, very confusing. I would recommend not trying to understand it because they don't even know what to think. So yeah, it's just a lot of different categories. But SB means breaststroke. SM means individual medley, and then just S8, S7 means freestyle, backstroke, and butterfly.
Awesome, cool. Here's one. Somebody asked, if you have a job or if you're swimming full time.
Absolutely. So being in New York City, I work for the New York Roadrunners, which is the organization that puts on the New York City Marathon among hundreds of other races going on in the city. So they have a small program for kids with disabilities, and I manage that program. It is kids for racing wheelchairs. So I have about 15 kids on my roster who I would normally meet with on a weekly basis, and we would hold practices, and we will supply all the equipment, because a lot of times the sport equipment for someone who's a challenge athlete can become very expensive. As I said, my walking legs are $20,000. My running legs can be $5,000 or $10,000, and a racing wheelchair can be, upwards of $5,000 or $10,000. So yes, I work for New York Roadrunners. I also do a little bit of coaching on the side as well. So I'm also an ambassador for the Challenge Athletes Foundation as well. So a little bit of a lot going on.
Yeah, for sure. And actually somebody asked, what your shirt said, and you just mentioned it. You work for the Challenge Athletes Foundation, which is CAF. Yep. So hopefully that answers that person's question.
Yeah, and just to educate a little bit on that though, the Challenge Athletes Foundation, they're based in San Diego, and our mission is to get people to the starting line. So if you're newly disabled, if you have a child who's disabled, and they're looking to get some type of sporting equipment, whether it be a running leg, a racing wheelchair, or some type of adaptive equipment, we give grants for that. So the goal is to get more people out who are physically challenged.
Awesome. And that's obviously a really great cause to work with.
It is.
So is there anything else that you want to kind of leave us with before we wrap up?
I just wish that everybody stays positive. I can't imagine our current situation lasting, hopefully not that much longer. But as we start to come back to a normal and start to get ready to jump back into the pool, I encourage everybody to not just go back to the way things were, but to be a little bit better, to be positive, and to remember that your teammates are, they're the ones who are going to get you to that medal podium. So you gotta love your teammates, respect your teammates, and listen to your coach, because your coach is your guiding light. He'll guide you to wherever you need to go.
For sure. Well, thank you very much for that. And again, thank you for your time. Everybody, I'll echo the same thing. Stay positive. This is going to end. Like, this period of time is definitely finite. Like, we are going to get to a point where pools are back open and we get back in and swim a little bit. So just keep your head on straight. You'll be all good. I want to remind everybody that we're doing a giveaway in, I think, 3 days. Actually, no, in 4 days. We're going to do a giveaway on Friday. So I'm going to do a live butterfly webinar in an endless pool. You guys can log on and watch me swim butterfly, and we can talk about a lot of different things that we see younger athletes doing. Talk about proper technique. We can talk about some drills. We're also going to be talking about some things that you can do at home in front of a mirror to improve yourself while you're unable to get into the pool. But just to remind you, this is the post that you should look for on our Instagram account. And there's some instructions down below that account or that post that you need to follow in order to enter. But don't forget that you have to go to this very specific webinar that I'm showing on your screen right now. You have to register and make sure you wait until the end, and you could be in the running to win up to $100 gift card. All right, everybody likes free stuff.
Yeah.
So again, stay safe, stay positive, and wash your dang hands. Bye, y'all.